You know, it's easy to feel like you're constantly drowning in information, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to sort through like a mountain of articles, reports, data, just to grasp something complex quickly, it's a real challenge.
It really is. We get it.
And that's exactly why we created the deep dive. Our mission here, really, is to cut through all that noise.
Mm.
We want to give you the essential insights, those surprising facts, and, those genuine aha moments.
Right. So you can walk away actually feeling well-informed, ready to talk about it.
Exactly. Ready to contribute.
Precisely. We take these complex subjects, try to unpack them piece by piece, present them in a way that's not just accessible or engaging, but really gives you a clear path to understanding the core of it all.
Well, today we are embarking on a deep dive into something fascinating, and frankly, it's becoming increasingly critical. It's a solution to one of the most pressing issues we face: affordable housing.
Yes.
We're talking about community land trusts, or CLTs.
CLTs, yeah, they're a powerful and incredibly adaptable model, really gaining traction.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a stack of sources.
We really have. We've got comprehensive guides from places like a National League of Cities, detailed explanations from, say, Investopedia, and then a whole lot of academic research looking into their, well, surprising history, how they've evolved, and their actual impact on communities, both here in the U.S. and globally, too.
And we've even got specific insights into how CLTs are tackling things like racial equity and wealth building.
Right. Crucial issues.
So our goal for this deep dive is pretty ambitious. We want to unpack exactly what a CLT is.
Right, the nuts and bolts.
Trace its origins, which are surprisingly deep, stretching back centuries, actually.
Yeah, people often miss that part.
Explore the benefits, which are pretty profound for individuals and communities.
Mm-hmm.
Understand the practical side, how cities are actually putting them into action now.
The how-to.
And then finally, look at their real-world effects, sometimes counterintuitive, on neighborhoods and the people living there. So what does this all mean for you and your community? Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the absolute core concept, a community land trust. When we talk about a CLT, what really defines it, especially this unique dual ownership model, it sounds a bit complicated, like two things owning one property.
Right. It can sound that way, but what's fascinating is how it works. The CLT operates on this fundamental distinction. It's like separating the cookie from the plate it sits on.
Okay.
It basically separates the ownership of the land itself from the ownership of the buildings or, the improvements on that land.
So the house versus the ground it's on.
Exactly. In a CLT model, the Community Land Trust, which is a nonprofit organization, acquires and permanently holds the title to the land. Think of it as the bedrock, right? The foundation that stays in community hands forever.
Okay, the community owns the land.
Permanently. And then the homeowner, they purchase only the house or building that sits on that land.
I see.
This division, this dual ownership, that's the cornerstone. That's what makes lasting affordability possible.
Okay, so if the homeowner doesn't own the land, how does that actually work day to day? Are they just renting the ground, or is it more secure than that? Like, do they get the stability you expect from homeownership?
It's definitely more permanent, much more secure than a typical rental. And this is where the ground lease comes in. It's a really critical piece.
The ground lease.
Yeah. This ground lease is typically very long-term and renewable. Often it's for 99 years.
99 years?
Right. So imagine leasing the land for a very, very long time. It gives the homeowner all the rights and stability of traditional ownership for their house, but keeps the underlying land itself in community hands. And crucially, this lease grants the homeowner and even their descendants the right to use that land for as long as they wish to live there.
So it passes down.
It can, yes. This long-term secure tenure is absolutely key to ensuring the home stays affordable over generations, not just for the first buyer. It gives the homeowner incredible security, incredible stability, but without the burden of owning the most speculative part of the property, which is usually the land.
That makes a lot of sense for stability. It really sounds like it gives homeowners a strong sense of being rooted without letting the land itself become a tool for speculation.
Precisely.
But how does it ensure the homes actually stay affordable for the next person, for future generations? I mean, real estate usually goes up, right? People want to build equity. How do you balance those things, that desire for personal gain versus the community need?
That's exactly the delicate balancing act CLTs are designed for. They try to balance the homeowner's legitimate goal, building some equity, some personal wealth, with the community's ongoing perpetual need for affordable housing.
Okay, so how do they do that balancing act?
The mechanism kicks in when a CLT home is resold. The ground lease, that document we just talked about, explicitly specifies the terms of resale.
Ah, it's written into the lease.
It's written right in. Critically, the sale must be to another income-qualified household, another low to moderate income household, at an affordable price. This ensures the home keeps serving its community purpose.
So how do they figure out that affordable price? Is there some standard formula? Something that makes it fair for the seller who's moving out, but also fair for the next buyer?
Resale formulas can vary a bit between different CLTs. Each community kind of tailors it to their local market, their specific goals, but they're all generally crafted to do two things. First, allow the homeowner to capture some of the increased value, due to market appreciation.
Okay, so they do build some equity.
Absolutely.
Wow.
But second, it ensures the sales price remains affordable for the next low-income household.
Yeah.
A common example is what's called the appraisal-based formula.
Appraisal base, how does that work?
So, say the home appreciates in value. With this formula, a percentage of that appreciation, let's say 25%, for example, is added to the original purchase price for the seller. This means the unit's price goes up, but only by a fraction of the full market appreciation. This keeps it within reach for the next income-eligible buyer. The homeowner still gains equity, which is important, but the community gains lasting affordability.
That's a really clever mechanism, almost like a built-in affordability valve, slowing down the price increases.
You could think of it that way, yeah.
And what about public subsidies? I know affordable housing often relies on a lot of public money up front to get projects built. How does a CLT handle that, especially thinking about long-term impact?
This is one of the most powerful and maybe often misunderstood aspects of the CLT model. This is where it really becomes a game changer compared to other approaches.
Okay.
Public dollars, grants, government funding. They often form the bulk of the initial subsidy needed to make the housing affordable for that very first buyer. Typically, we're talking about helping households earning somewhere between, say, 50% and 80% of the area median income, the AMI.
Right, the standard targets for affordable housing.
Exactly. Now, think about a traditional approach, like down payment assistance, DPA. That initial subsidy might help one buyer get into a home. Great. But then, if that home is resold at the full market rate a few years later,
The seller gets all the profit and the affordability is gone.
precisely, the full market value is realized by the seller, which is good for them individually. But then for the next low-income buyer who wants to purchase that same house, another subsidy is needed, often a much larger one because prices have gone up.
So it's like this constant cycle, this revolving door where public money is constantly needed just to keep a small pool of homes affordable for a limited time.
Exactly. You've hit it. Imagine DPA town. A home is market priced at, say, $200,000. A buyer can afford $155,000. So a $45,000 subsidy is given as DPA directly to that buyer.
Oh.
10 years later, maybe that home's market value is $240,000. It sells for $240,000. The seller gains a substantial amount. Great for them. But the next buyer, they might still only be able to afford $155,000. Now they need an $85,000 subsidy just to make it affordable again.
Wow. So the public investment essentially just disappears with each market rate sale. The affordability isn't locked in for the community.
Right. The public investment has only one-time impact. But now, let's look at CLT town.
Okay.
Same $200,000 market value home. It might be sold for $155,000 to the first buyer using that same $45,000 subsidy. But here, the subsidy is provided to the CLT to basically buy down the cost of the land component, making that initial price possible.
Ah, the subsidy goes to the land trust, not the buyer directly.
Right. 10 years later, market value is still $240,000.
Okay.
But the CLT resale formula, maybe it caps the price at, say, $185,000.
Okay.
The initial home buyer still makes a gain $30,000 on the sale, plus whatever equity they built paying down their mortgage, so there's still personal wealth building. But critically,
No new subsidy needed.
no additional subsidies needed for the next income-eligible buyer to purchase it at $185,000. The initial $45,000 public investment effectively grew in its impact. It continually subsidizes the price for every subsequent buyer, forever.
That is a powerful distinction.
It's a fundamental shift, isn't it? From a transactional one-time fix to a perpetual community-driven investment that keeps giving back for generations. It builds a permanently affordable housing stock.
Yeah.
This is the profound insight. Public funds, when invested in a CLT, create an enduring, compounding asset for the community.
That's a powerful distinction. It really shows how CLTs are designed for long-term systemic impact. It's like creating a permanent affordability engine.
Exactly.
An engine.
That makes the core concept incredibly clear. But what I find even more fascinating, honestly, is the history behind CLTs. Where did this idea even come from? It sounds like such a modern kind of elegant solution, but I have a feeling the roots go much deeper than just the last few decades.
You are absolutely right. The roots are surprisingly deep. The whole concept of treating land as a common heritage, right? As a resource for the entire community, not just an individual possession for speculation.
Mhm.
That has a very long tradition in the United
Really?
States.
How far back? Well, this ethic of stewardship goes all the way back to Native American attitudes towards land. Their communal view was really different from the European notions of private sellable property that came later.
Mm.
And even think about the New England town commons. Land held collectively for grazing or public assembly that echoes this same sentiment.
Right, the village green.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And later, early American thinkers like Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, each of them, in their own way, expressed concerns about land monopolization, about needing to ensure access for ordinary citizens.
So it's not just a new idea, but almost like a reemergence, a reclaiming of an older, more communal way of thinking about land.
In many ways, yes, a reclaiming. And I know you've heard some prominent intellectual figures from the late 19th, early 20th centuries mentioned in connection with CLTs.
Yes, definitely. Can you tell us about their contributions? Who are these key thinkers?
Absolutely. Two key intellectual forebears really stand out. The first is Henry George.
Henry George.
Okay. He was a self-educated American economist, a journalist, born in Philadelphia back in 1839. George became deeply influenced by the work of the English political theorist John Stuart Mill, particularly Mill's concept of the social increment.
Social increment. Okay, what does that mean in plain language? Sounds academic.
It's actually a pretty powerful idea. It's the notion that most of the appreciating value of land, why land gets more expensive, isn't created by the individual landowner doing something on that specific plot.
Okay, so where does the value come from?
It comes from the growth and development of the surrounding society. Things like population increase, new roads, new schools, businesses moving in, maybe a new subway line gets built nearby.
Right. The neighborhood gets better, so the land is worth more.
Exactly. Imagine land value skyrocketing because a big tech company moves in nearby or a nice new park is built. That increase isn't because the individual landowner did anything specific to their plot. It's society's growth driving that value. That's the social increment.
Okay, I get it.
George explored this in his groundbreaking 1879 book, Progress and Poverty, and it became this huge international bestseller, sold something like 3 million copies. Unbelievable for the time.
Wow. And what was his central argument in the book, connecting that social increment to poverty?
George asked this profound question, and it's still relevant today. Why does immense poverty persist, even when there's so much wealth and technological progress?
Right, the Gilded Age paradox.
Exactly. Now, unlike someone like Karl Marx, who blamed poverty on capitalists capturing the value of labor, George argued the root cause was different. He said poverty arose because a small group of landowners were capturing this social increment, this appreciating value of land created by everybody else, by society's growth and public investment.
So they were profiting from something they didn't create.
Precisely. His proposed solution was the famous single tax on land. The idea was to tax away this socially created value, this unearned increment, and use that revenue for public services. It would also incentivize using land productively rather than just holding it and waiting for the price to go up.
Fascinating. Taxing the unearned gains from land speculation to fund public good. Okay, who is the other key figure you mentioned?
That would be Ebenezer Howard. He was an English urban planner, also largely self-taught, who published a book in 1898 called Tomorrow, A Peaceful Path to Real Reform. It was later retitled Garden Cities of Tomorrow.
Garden cities. I've heard of that concept.
Howard was deeply inspired by George's work, and he proposed this sweeping solution to the problems of urban crowding and sprawl that were huge issues in industrial England. His idea was garden cities.
What were they exactly?
They were meticulously planned communities, designed for maybe 32,000 people or so, specifically combining the best features of both town and country living. He envisioned them as these green, self-sufficient rings around major cities.
And how did his vision connect back to that land ownership idea that Henry George was so focused on?
This is key. Howard proposed that these garden cities would be developed on land that was leased from a municipal corporation.
Leased land again.
Yes. This was his ingenious mechanism to capture that social increment we talked about, using the lease payments for public improvements parks, schools, libraries, civic amenities, rather than letting it just enrich private landowners.
So using collective ownership of the land as an engine for community benefit instead of Georgia's single tax.
Exactly, municipal ownership rather than taxation. And these weren't just pie-in-the-sky ideas. About 32 garden cities were actually developed in England, starting around 1903. And here in the U.S., followers of Henry George created similar communities, sometimes called single tax colonies like Arden, Delaware, and Fairhope, Alabama, in the early 1900s.
And do those still exist?
Remarkably, yes. Both Arden and Fairhope still exist today as thriving leased land communities. It really demonstrates the staying power of this model.
Wow. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, though. How did these philosophical concepts, these planned community ideas, evolve into the specific formalized community land trust model we see today, particularly in the U.S. context? I understand the civil rights movement played a truly pivotal role.
Indeed, it did. An absolutely crucial role. The country's first formal CLT, the one that really codified the model, was New Communities, organized down in rural Georgia in 1969 by veterans of the civil rights movement.
New Communities, 1969. What was the context there? Why did they need this?
The context is absolutely crucial, and it's deeply poignant. Black farmers in the South at that time were being systematically forced off their land.
Why? What was happening?
Two main reasons. One was the rapid mechanization of agriculture, which favored huge farms and pushed smallholders out. But the other, tragically, was direct retaliation for their brave involvement in the civil rights movement.
Retaliation. Losing their land because they were fighting for their rights.
Yes. Land was power, economic power, political autonomy, and losing it meant losing everything. It was a deliberate tactic to undermine the movement.
That's just heartbreaking. So, faced with that immediate existential threat, how did a land trust become their innovative solution? Where did that idea come from?
The inspiration came from, well, an unexpected but truly transformative place, Israel.
Israel. How so?
In 1968, a delegation, including really prominent figures like Slater King, Bob Swan, and Charles Sherrod, traveled to Israel specifically to study the kibbutz and the moshav agricultural models.
Collective farming communities.
Exactly. They were particularly interested in how these collective settlements managed land through a ground leasing system. They saw how it provided stability and shared benefit.
And they brought that idea back.
They returned completely convinced that a network of agricultural cooperatives operating on leased land held by a trust could empower the rural South. It could provide a foundation for economic independence for black farmers and act as a crucial bulwark against further land loss. It was a direct translation of a global model to address a very specific, urgent American injustice.
So it was born directly out of this very immediate crisis, this need for land security and community empowerment, a response to injustice. How did this practical activist experience then get formalized? How did it spread and become the model we recognize today, applicable way beyond rural Georgia?
Right, how did it scale and adapt? Well, the lessons learned from new communities, and also looking back at those older leased land communities like Arden, they were first captured and disseminated in a book called The Community Land Trust, published in 1972. That laid out the initial framework.
Okay, the first blueprint.
But the really crucial refinement, the expansion of the concept, came with the Community Land Trust Handbook in 1982. This handbook introduced several key organizational and operational improvements.
What were the big changes in the handbook?
Most notably, it strategically shifted the emphasis. It moved from primarily rural agricultural applications towards urban problems. Things like affordable housing preservation and neighborhood revitalization, especially in cities starting to face gentrification and displacement.
So it became an urban tool, too?
A major urban tool. That was a key shift.
And what became the definitive defining feature of a CLT from that point on? What really cemented its core purpose in this new urban context?
The handbook made permanent affordability of owner-occupied housing a non-negotiable defining feature of the CLT.
Permanent affordability, that was the line in the sand.
Absolutely. And it specified how to enforce it. Through a preemptive option, meaning the CLT gets the first right to buy back the home if the owner wants to sell, and a clear resale formula, both embedded right there in that all-important ground lease.
Got it. The legal mechanisms.
Yes. It also took a strong stance on property rights. It argued that legitimate property interests, things like security, equity, leaving a legacy, must be durably secured and equitably balanced between individuals and their communities, ensuring security, equity, and legacy for both. This was a crucial evolution from the earlier books focused mostly on people and land. The handbook was squarely focused on balancing private and public interest, ensuring that shared benefit over the long term.
That's a significant evolution, shifting from rural activism to urban housing and really codifying those mechanisms for long-term impact. Did this lead to a big increase in CLTs across the U.S. after 1982?
Oh, absolutely. The growth has been really quite exponential. Think about it. There were only 4 CLTs in the entire 1970s.
Sure.
Just 4. But the numbers grew rapidly after that handbook came out. There was a significant acceleration in the 1980s, peaking around 1989. By 2013, there were over 250 CLTs operating in 46 states and D.C., a huge testament to the model's adaptability and effectiveness.
Over 250, that's incredible growth. Did the way they were formed change too?
Yes, that shifted as well. Initially, CLTs were largely activist-led, privately funded through grants, donations. But over time, we saw increasing local government participation.
Cities started getting involved.
Big time. In the 1990s, 36% of new CLTs were government-initiated. That jumped to 44% in the 2000s, and they started relying more on public funds. This signaled a major embrace of the model by municipal governments, moving it from the fringes.
That sounds like a major turning point, doesn't it?
Right.
When local governments started seeing CLTs not just as a niche thing, but as a core strategy for affordable housing.
It really was. And this institutionalization got another boost when the Housing and Community Development Act of 1992 actually included a specific definition of CLTs.
Ah, federal recognition.
Exactly. That officially opened doors for federal assistance, gave them a new level of legitimacy. Plus, alongside this, a crucial national infrastructure started to grow around them.
Like support networks.
Yes. Organizations like the Institute for Community Economics, or ICE. They published a newsletter called Community Economics, which was vital for sharing best practices, lessons learned, fostering a sense of shared purpose across the country.
Spreading the knowledge?
Precisely. And national conferences became really important, like the first big one, held in an African-American church in Atlanta in 1987. These brought practitioners together, fostering shared learning, solidarity. And then later, the National Community Land Trust Academy was established in 2006.
An academy for training.
Yeah, to standardize training, promote best practices, ensure quality and consistency, make sure everyone understood the core principles as the movement scaled up so rapidly.
It's truly remarkable how a model born out of the civil rights movement, with intellectual roots way back in the 19th century, found such widespread application and institutional support. So, how are CLTs adapting today? Is the model still evolving, or has it kind of settled into a fixed form?
Oh, it's definitely still evolving.
Yeah.
Continuously adapting to new urban realities, new needs. We're seeing continued hybridization,
Hybridization, like mixing models?
Sort of. Driven by things like the decentralization of support structures. They don't always rely on one single national body anymore. There's also diversification in what they do, moving beyond just home ownership to include rental housing, commercial spaces, community gardens, other facilities.
Right, broadening their scope.
We also see what's called municipalization, where cities themselves directly start and operate CLTs, sometimes right within city housing departments. And regionalization, where CLTs might serve multiple towns or counties.
Expanding their reach.
Exactly. But what's really interesting, I think, is that despite all these modern adaptations, these structural changes, there's also this powerful, renewed focus on the core values.
Like going back to the roots.
In a way, yes. We're seeing a vibrant revival of interest in CLTs, specifically among communities of color. They see them as a crucial bulwark against displacement, a powerful vehicle for empowerment, for self-determination, directly reconnecting with those deep historical roots in land stewardship and community control that started it all back in Georgia.
It's a powerful testament, isn't it, to how a flexible, community-centered model can endure, adapt over time, and stay relevant across different eras and challenges.
Absolutely. It's quite a story.
So we've explored the core concept, the fascinating history. Now let's talk about the payoff. What are the transformative benefits of these CLTs, both for individuals looking for stable housing and for the wider communities striving for equity, for resilience? What difference do they actually make on the ground?
Well, the most immediate, the most critical benefit, and often the primary driver for starting a CLT is lasting affordability.
Right, the core promise.
Many cities face this frustrating revolving door problem with affordable housing, right? New units get created, often with public subsidies, but then affordability restrictions expire, or the homes get resold at inflated market rates, and poof, the affordable unit is gone. Public investments effectively get squandered because the housing stock overall just doesn't stay affordable.
It feels like constantly bailing water out of a leaky boat.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
CLTs directly tackle this. They ensure that those public investments in housing truly last. They create a steadily increasing stock of permanently affordable units in a city's inventory over time. This isn't a temporary fix. It's a long-term solution that continually recycles that initial public investment to create more affordable homes, generation after generation.
So a home made affordable today for one family.
Will remain affordable for another family decades from now without needing a whole new infusion of subsidy.
That's huge. It means public money is working harder, longer, for more people over time. Okay, but beyond just the raw affordability numbers, how do CLTs impact things like community empowerment, racial equity, even wealth building for residents? These are really deep, complex issues.
This is truly where CLTs shine, I think, as a transformative tool that goes way beyond just housing units. First off, lasting affordability itself is a profound form of community empowerment.
How so?
Well, it ensures that low and moderate income residents can maintain a home, maintain a presence, have a vital stake in neighborhoods where they might otherwise be completely priced out due to rising prices, due to gentrification.
Right, it keeps them in the community.
Exactly. And this is particularly important for communities of color, who have historically been pushed out or excluded from desirable areas or neighborhoods that are redeveloping. CLTs are flexible tools, too. They can safeguard not only homeownership, but also rental opportunities, and even preserve a vital mix of small businesses, community spaces, ensuring a vibrant, inclusive neighborhood fabric. They become anchors against that tide of displacement.
So they actively help maintain the cultural, the social fabric of existing communities, especially those most vulnerable to gentrification pressures. What about the homeownership gap? We know that gap is persistent and disproportionately affects certain racial and ethnic groups. Can CLTs genuinely address that?
They absolutely can, and they are proving to be quite effective. CLTs make homeownership significantly more affordable and more stable for low-income households. That's a critical step in addressing the homeownership gap. There was a 2019 study looking at various shared equity models, including CLTs.
What did it find?
It revealed that an impressive 95% of shared equity homes were affordable to households earning 80% of the area median income, or AMI, and nearly half were affordable to very low-income households earning up to 50% AMI.
Wow, reaching really low income levels.
Exactly. And this directly impacts the substantial racial wealth gap in our country. You know the stats are stark. Non-Hispanic white households' net worth is nearly 18 times greater than black households, 7 times greater than Hispanic households. CLTs provide a viable pathway for building wealth through home equity for those historically shut out of the housing market.
That's a staggering disparity, 18 times greater. Are CLTs actually making a measurable difference, though? Is the data showing real change in who owns these homes?
The data is incredibly encouraging on that front. Back in 2000, only about 13% of CLT homeowners across the U.S. were people of color.
Okay, 13%.
By 2018, that figure had dramatically increased to 43%.
13 to 43%, that's a huge shift.
It's a dramatic shift. Now, shared equity homes overall are still predominantly owned by white, non-Hispanic households, let's be clear. But this jump shows the potential. And cities have a clear pathway to expand opportunities even further for Black, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Indigenous households by specifically targeting support, removing barriers within these programs.
How can they target support?
Well, for example, some CLTs prioritize applicants who have been historically displaced from a particular neighborhood. Or they might allocate a certain percentage of homes to specific demographic groups that are underrepresented in homeownership. This kind of proactive approach directly contributes to housing justice and starts to mend those historical inequities.
And I imagine this model, because the land stays in community control, also allows for more direct community involvement, a more democratic approach to development.
Yes, profoundly so. CLTs foster deep democratic control. They often work directly with residents. They become a platform where neighbors can identify community needs, leverage the CLT's resources to meet those needs, and actively organize to shape the city's future.
So it's not just top-down.
Not at all. This goes beyond just being consulted. It often involves residents sitting on the CLT board of directors, developing comprehensive neighborhood plans, weighing in on policy proposals, on development projects that directly affect low and moderate income residents. In this way, they significantly enhance democratic control over land and housing in their cities. They really shift power dynamics away from just outside developers or city hall towards local residents.
Okay, so beyond individual households and democratic control, what about the broader benefits? Community stewardship, overall neighborhood stability.
CLTs play a vital role here, too, in building inclusive communities that actively resist displacement and gentrification.
Resisting gentrification, how?
Well, those processes, soaring home prices, speculative investment, they often disproportionately harm people of color, right? Pushing them out of neighborhoods they could once afford, erasing cultural heritage, fracturing social networks. By providing stable, permanently affordable housing, CLTs help families, especially those with children, avoid the really negative impacts on health, on education, on long-term income that are often associated with housing instability and frequent moves.
It creates a foundation.
Exactly. A secure foundation that truly lays the groundwork for children's lifelong success and ensures neighborhoods can retain their long-term residents, their character, their social glue.
It sounds like they're building resilience right into the neighborhood fabric, creating these anchors. Are CLTs limited to just residential properties? Or can they be used for other community needs too?
Not at all. While housing is often the primary focus, CLTs offer remarkable flexible development capabilities. They can absolutely develop and steward commercial properties, think small storefronts for local businesses. They can create and maintain essential neighborhood parks, establish community gardens, or provide affordable space for other vital nonprofits like childcare centers or community health clinics.
So they can meet a whole range of needs.
Precisely. This adaptability means they can respond directly to the diverse, evolving needs of the specific community they serve. They can become these comprehensive community development engines, not just housing providers. This flexibility is really one of their unsung strengths, I think. It allows them to be truly bespoke solutions for specific community challenges.
So from individual wealth building and stability to community-wide resilience, democratic control, and even comprehensive development, CLTs offer a truly holistic suite of benefits. It's clearly more than just a housing program. It's a powerful community building strategy.
That's a great way to put it, a community building strategy.
Okay, so if community land trusts offer all these incredible multifaceted benefits, how do we actually get more of them? How do cities get them off the ground? And maybe even more importantly, how do they sustain them for the long haul? What's the essential municipal role in making CLTs a widespread reality, not just these, isolated success stories?
Yeah, scaling up and sustaining them is key. And the municipal role is absolutely crucial. It's often the missing link for achieving real scale. So in starting a CLT, the initial steps are pretty foundational. First, you have to incorporate it as a nonprofit organization.
Get the legal structure right.
Exactly. That gives it legal standing, allows it to apply for grants, manage assets. Then it's about securing funding. And it's usually two types: operating support, to cover staff salaries, rent, administrative costs, and project funding, the capital to actually acquire land and develop or rehab homes.
Where does that funding typically come from?
It's often a mix. Public grants from city, state, federal sources. Philanthropic foundations play a big role, sometimes private donations too. And hiring dedicated staff is essential. CLTs require specialized expertise, real estate development, finance, community engagement. It's complex work.
And I imagine it's not just about the legal and financial stuff, right? You also have to prepare the people who will actually live in these unique homes. It's a different kind of home ownership model.
Exactly. That's critical. Developing and implementing a really robust homebuyer selection and orientation program is vital. You need to ensure prospective homeowners really understand the unique nature of CLT ownership, what the ground lease means, what the resale restrictions are, what their rights and responsibilities are within the community.
Manage expectations up front.
Precisely. Good upfront education prevents misunderstandings down the road and builds a strong foundation for success. Equally important is engaging with local lenders.
Getting the banks on board.
Yes. New CLTs need to do extensive outreach to familiarize local banks and credit unions with the CLT model for mortgage financing. Traditional lenders might hesitate when they see a grand lease. They might not understand it. So building trust, educating them on its security, its benefits, its track record, that's paramount. Without lender buy-in, the model can't function at scale because most buyers need a mortgage.
Right, you need financing. Okay, so once a CLT is established, what specific, tangible things can cities do to help sustain its long-term impact and help it grow? Are there particular policies or levers they can pull?
There are several really powerful mechanisms municipalities can leverage, often through their own planning and housing departments. One big one is through public land disposition policies.
Disposing of city-owned land.
Exactly. Cities typically own a fair amount of land, maybe vacant lots, old municipal buildings, parcels left over from failed projects. They could choose how to dispose of it, instead of just selling it to the highest bidder, likely for market rate development.
They can prioritize affordability.
They can prioritize lasting affordability by channeling these public lands towards CLTs, often at low or no cost. This provides CLTs with a crucial pipeline of properties to develop, significantly reducing their project costs.
That's smart. Turning potential liabilities like vacant lots into assets for affordable housing. What else can cities do to provide that property pipeline?
Another key tool is establishing or supporting land banks.
Land banks, what do they do?
They're usually nonprofit or public authorities that acquire vacant, abandoned, often tax-delinquent properties. They have special powers to clear liens, resolve complicated title issues, basically clean up these problem properties.
Okay.
Land banks then serve as a crucial intermediary, providing a steady stream of clean properties for CLTs to acquire and develop, often at very low cost. Albany, New York, for example, has a land bank that explicitly commits to promoting inclusive neighborhoods and lasting affordability in its policies, making it a natural partner for CLTs there.
And what about encouraging affordable housing from private developers? Can CLTs play a role there too?
Absolutely. Cities can use inclusionary housing policies, sometimes called inclusionary zoning.
Right, requiring developers to include affordable units.
Exactly. These policies mandate that private developers include a certain percentage of affordable units in new residential projects. Now, the key here is that cities can require lasting terms of affordability in these policies. They can stipulate that these required affordable units be stewarded by a CLT rather than having affordability restrictions that expire after, say, 15 or 30 years.
Ah, so the CLT ensures the inclusionary units stay affordable forever.
Precisely. This creates a sustainable source of affordable housing generated by the private market, without relying solely on direct public subsidy for every single unit.
So it's about making sure the whole system supports the model, not inadvertently undermining it. What about property taxes? That can be a huge burden, especially for low-income homeowners, right? Even if the mortgage is affordable.
That's a critical point and often tricky one. Cities really need to work proactively with their local tax districts to develop affordable tax agreements.
How would those work?
Well, it's about figuring out how to assess property taxes fairly when you have this split ownership. If the homeowner only owns the improvements, not the land, how is the tax calculated? Does the assessment reflect the resale restrictions? The Houston CLT, for instance, faced this as a major hurdle. How do you ensure low-income residents can actually afford the property taxes, especially when surrounding market values and land taxes are rising rapidly? Clear, favorable tax agreements that recognize the CLT structure are essential to prevent homeowners from being taxed out of their homes.
Okay, makes sense. Beyond funding, land, and taxes, are there administrative hurdles that cities can help smooth out? Bureaucracy can kill projects?
Oh, definitely. Cities can play a crucial role in minimizing administrative barriers. Cumbersome real estate development processes, multiple layers of reviews, lengthy city council approvals, complex permitting can significantly increase costs and timelines, discouraging smaller, affordable projects like those often undertaken by CLTs.
So streamline the process.
Yes. Streamlining these processes, maybe creating dedicated fast-track review timelines, establishing standardized review processes specifically for CLT projects, that can make a huge difference in reducing costs and accelerating development. And finally, monitoring and enforcement are key.
Keeping the CLTs accountable.
Right. Especially for privately managed projects receiving public funds or land. Cities can establish clear administrative guidelines for things like fair and equitable resident selection processes, ensuring income targeting is met, with clear penalties for non-compliance. This ensures accountability, makes sure the CLT stays true to its mission, and protects the public's investment.
We've talked a lot about the classic CLT structure.
Yeah.
The CLT owns the land, homeowner gets a 99-year ground lease. Are there variations on that, especially regarding the land ownership piece, maybe for practical reasons in some places?
Yes, there are some really interesting and important adaptations emerging. The traditional model, as we've discussed, is that dual ownership with the 99-year ground lease. The Irvine CLT in California, for instance, uses that classic model with a resale formula tied to the area median income. But a novel approach, really born out of the challenges in very expensive, dense urban areas, involves using restrictive covenants instead of direct land ownership by the CLT.
Restrictive covenants, how does that work instead of the CLT actually owning the land? That sounds fundamentally different.
It is quite different. The Chicago CLT is a prime example. It's uniquely housed within the city's Department of Housing, and it uses a restrictive covenant placed on the property's deed to guarantee long-term affordability, rather than owning the land itself.
So the homeowner owns the land and the house.
Yes. In this model, the homeowner holds the full fee-simple title to both the land and the improvements, just like a traditional homeowner. But This legally binding covenant runs with the land, restricting the resale price for future sales to income-eligible buyers, ensuring the home remains affordable for, say, 30 or 50 years or even longer, depending on how it's written.
Why choose that approach? What are the benefits?
Well, it offers several potential advantages. First, it completely avoids the significant challenge and cost of land acquisition, which could be a massive barrier for CLTs trying to start or scale up in dense, expensive cities like Chicago.
Right, land is prohibitively expensive.
Exactly. Second, it sidesteps any lingering perceptions of second-class ownership that some people might mistakenly associate with ground leases, even though that's not really accurate. And third, it can simplify the legal structure from a lender's perspective. It potentially makes traditional banks more comfortable providing mortgages because the underlying ownership looks more conventional to them.
That does sound like a pragmatic solution, especially for those tough urban markets. But are there any downsides? Potential challenges with relying on covenants instead of the tried and true ground lease model.
There certainly are potential challenges. These covenants are relatively untested compared to the ground lease model, which has decades of legal precedent behind it.
Legal risks.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
They could face legal challenges, maybe arguing they violate arcane property law rules, like the rule against perpetuities, which limits how long property can be tied up, or rules against restraints on alienation, which limit restrictions on selling property freely. Enforcement against foreclosing lenders could also be more complex. If a homeowner defaults, the bank forecloses. Will the affordability covenant survive the foreclosure, or will the bank argue it interferes with their ability to recover their loan? These are ongoing legal and practical considerations for CLTs adopting this newer approach, though many legal experts believe these covenants can be carefully drafted to withstand such challenges.
And finally, thinking about that Chicago example where the city itself houses the CLT, what does that mean for its original community organizing aspect? I know that grassroots activist history was so critical. Does it change the sort of soul of the CLT?
This raises a really important and ongoing question, absolutely. Historically, CLTs often emerged from strong community organizing roots. They were often aimed at city policies, advocating for residents' needs, sometimes even challenging existing power structures.
Right. They're outsiders pushing for change.
Exactly. When cities start to house CLTs directly or heavily control them, they face a critical choice. Do they want to retain that broader, sometimes advocacy-oriented community organizing component within the CLT structure?
Yeah.
Or does the CLT risk becoming just, one more component of their existing affordable housing strategy integrated into bureaucratic processes, losing that grassroots edge?
It's a trade-off between scale and spirit.
It's a delicate balance, definitely, between institutionalizing the model for efficiency, scale, and broader adoption, and preserving its grassroots, advocacy-oriented spirit. Its unique ability to foster bottom-up community power and voice. The most successful models, I think, often find ways to maintain genuine resident voice and control, even when there's significant public partnership and oversight.
That's a crucial point, ensuring the model doesn't lose its soul as it gains wider acceptance and support. That balance between efficiency and empowerment is key.
Absolutely key.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. The nuts and bolts, the history, the benefits, the crucial city role. Now, let's really see these concepts in action. What do community land trusts look like on the ground? In different cities across the U.S., maybe? And even globally, especially in contexts that might be vastly different from, say, a typical American city.
It's truly illustrative to look at diverse case studies, because they really highlight the incredible adaptability of the CLT model. In the U.S., we see several really distinct approaches. Let's take Dudley Neighbors, Inc., DNI, in Boston, MA.
Okay, boss.
DNI was created way back in 1984. It was a response to severe disinvestment, widespread abandonment in the Dudley Street neighborhood. It was a really tough area.
Yeah.
But DNI wasn't just about housing units.
What else did they do?
Get this. They were granted eminent domain authority by the city in 1988.
Eminent domain. For a community group, that's rare.
Extremely rare and incredibly powerful. It allowed them to assemble these fragmented land parcels, often vacant lots filled with trash, used for drug activity and undertake comprehensive revitalization. They now steward land for a whole range of uses: limited equity co-ops, condos, rental housing, but also urban parks, commercial greenhouses, even community centers. It's a very holistic, neighborhood-wide approach. It really shows how CLTs can rebuild a community from the ground up, not just provide individual homes.
So way beyond just housing, they're rebuilding community infrastructure, green space, economic opportunity. Okay, what about somewhere completely different, like Houston? Big, sprawling, car-centric city. How does a CLT function there?
The Houston Community Land Trust, HCLT, it's interesting. It functions as an independent nonprofit, but it works very closely with the Houston Land Bank and the City of Houston's Housing Department. Their main focus isn't really on building new stuff. It's more on acquiring existing homes in a super competitive market.
Buying existing houses. Why?
To meet the immense demand for affordable housing and essentially preserve access and opportunities for low-income residents in a city that's gentrifying really rapidly, they're trying to keep affordable options available in changing neighborhoods.
Makes sense. What challenges have they faced?
They've faced a couple of significant ones. One was just the slow process of building trust within communities often unfamiliar with the CLT model. Education takes time. And the other, as we discussed earlier, was the critical need for specific affordable tax agreements, because Houston's property taxes have been rising so fast. If a homeowner's taxes skyrocket, even with an affordable mortgage, the home can become unaffordable. It really highlights the need for that deep municipal collaboration on all fronts, not just land, but taxes too.
Right. Building community trust and tackling those property tax issues sound like recurring themes. How about Minneapolis? They're known for pretty progressive housing policies.
In Minneapolis, the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, CLCLT, is a great example of grassroots origins. It actually emerged organically from a collaboration of local neighborhood groups. They work extensively with land bank twin cities for acquiring properties, and they famously partnered with the City of Minneapolis to use significant federal HUD Neighborhood Stabilization Program funds after the 2008 foreclosure crisis, buying up foreclosed homes and making them permanently affordable through the CLT.
So they really stepped in during a crisis.
Exactly. And CLCLT continuously aligns its efforts with citywide long-term affordability policies. It shows a really strong symbiotic city-CLT partnership that leverages public resources efficiently and strategically.
And out west, Colorado, for example, also seeing rapid growth, big affordability crises.
Elevation CLT in Aurora, Colorado, is a powerful example of cross-sector partnership. It's this real collaboration between philanthropy, the public sector, the City of Aurora, private developers, and community organizations, all working together.
What's their model?
In 2019, they partnered with the City of Aurora to create permanently affordable homeownership opportunities for families at or below 80% AMI. Similar to Houston, their strategy is primarily acquiring and remodeling existing homes. What's notable about Elevation is their strong emphasis on deep engagement with community members, not just as beneficiaries, but as partners in educating neighbors and advocating for CLTs, really building broad understanding and buy-in for the model.
We touched on Irvine, California earlier when talking about the ground lists. What's their specific story? How did their CLT come about?
The Irvine CLT was established back in 2006, and it was born out of a pretty stark reality. The median single-family home price in Irvine at that time was an astounding $800,000.
$800,000 back in 2006.
It's exactly. Basically pricing out almost all middle and low-income families. The city recognized this was a crisis, and they committed to creating long-term affordable housing, setting this ambitious target of making 10% of its housing stock affordable by 2025.
How did they plan to do it?
They leveraged a historic opportunity, the annexation of the huge El Toro Marine Corps Air Station. A massive piece of prime land became available. Irvine CLT uses that classic dual ownership model, 99-year ground lease resale formula tied to AMI.
Oh.
However, their growth was actually slower than they initially anticipated.
Why was that?
Partly due to the 2008 recession, it really impacted their plan to acquire affordable units through developer contributions from inclusionary zoning. The market slowdown meant fewer developments, fewer required affordable units coming online. It just shows that even really well-laid plans with strong city backing can face external economic headwinds.
These U.S. examples truly show the flexibility, the adaptation of the model across different cities, different market conditions, different partnerships. But CLTs aren't just an American thing, are they? How are they being applied in the global South, where informality and housing, slums, squatter settlements is such a huge, persistent issue?
This is a vital and I think incredibly impactful area of application. Globally, something like 1 in 8 people, nearly 1 billion people, live in informal settlement.
1 billion people.
Yeah. Often lacking formal property titles, lacking basic infrastructure like clean water, sanitation, burdened by social exclusion, stigma. These are vast, complex challenges that traditional housing solutions have often failed to adequately address.
What are those traditional responses, and why haven't they fully worked to solve such widespread informality?
Well, broadly speaking, there are three main traditional responses, and each has significant shortcomings in these contexts. First, you have mass housing projects, big government-built apartment blocks, often on the outskirts of cities.
Right, those large-scale projects.
They often result in these peripheral, isolated communities. Monotonous designs, prioritizing sheer quantity of units over quality of life. They can lead to high maintenance costs down the line, poor social integration, even social segregation. And critically, they often exclude the most vulnerable populations, people without verifiable income, without formal employment records.
So quantity over livability and often missing the people who need it most. Okay, what's the second approach?
Second is upgrading. This involves physical improvements to existing informal settlements, paving roads, installing drainage, improving housing structures. It's generally less expensive than building new projects, and it has the benefit of preserving existing social ties. People don't have to move.
That sounds better. What's the downside?
The big risk is gentrification from within. As the area improves, rents and informal property values go up. This can lead to the displacement of existing tenants or even less affluent original residents who can no longer afford to stay in the upgraded area they helped build.
Ah, so it can push people out unintentionally.
Okay.
And the third traditional approach.
That's land titling. Simply giving people formal legal titles to the land they occupy. It sounds like a direct solution, right? Give people ownership.
Yeah, seems logical. Provide security.
And it does improve tenure security, which is important.
Yeah.
But research consistently shows it often doesn't significantly reduce poverty on its own. It doesn't automatically improve local markets or provide broad access to credit for the poor, as was often hoped.
Really? Why not?
Well, it can even reinforce gender hierarchies if titles are only granted to male heads of household. It can impose unexpected new financial burdens like property taxes people suddenly have to pay, and in really prime locations, it can paradoxically lead to more displacement as residents face pressure or temptation to sell their newly valuable land. And interestingly, many households in informal settlements actually report feeling secure enough without formal titles, suggesting that legal title isn't always the top priority or the magic bullet.
So CLTs might offer a more robust, more holistic solution in these really complex contexts compared to those traditional approaches.
They absolutely do. CLTs offer both immediate and long-term affordability and security. They directly mitigate those gentrification and displacement risks we see with upgrading or titling alone. And crucially, they rely on genuine community control. They actively engage the existing self-organizing resident networks, which are often already very strong and sophisticated in informal settlements.
Harnessing the existing social structure.
Exactly, harnessing existing social capital and collective action. They provide a stable land base that resists market pressures, allowing residents to invest incrementally in their homes and their communities without that constant fear of being priced out or pushed out.
Can you give us some specific examples? CLTs making a difference in the global south. Maybe one that faced big challenges and perhaps another that's seen as a real success.
Absolutely. The Tunis, Kenya, TBCLT is an interesting case. It had successes. It did retain affordable housing for residents. It helped unify the community around common goals, strengthen social networks, extended land rights, especially for women, which was a huge equity gain, and it even facilitated access to housing finance for members. Residents formed cooperatives for housing development, showing real self-sufficiency.
Sounds positive. What were the challenges?
Significant challenges. Administrative difficulties dealing with local government bureaucracy. Residents' initial unfamiliarity with the complex CLT model took a lot of effort to overcome. There were internal leadership conflicts, apparently. Some leaders avoided holding re-elections to stay in power. And critically, they struggled to enforce some of their own constitutional rules, like eliminating absentee ownership by people who didn't live there. This ultimately weakened their internal governance and eroded political support. It's a powerful lesson in how important robust internal mechanisms and strong external advocacy are.
Wow. It sounds like the challenges of maintaining community governance, enforcing rules, navigating politics, they're very real, even when the community is highly motivated. What about a more straightforward success story?
The Caña Martín Peña CMP CLT in Puerto Rico is truly remarkable, a real beacon for community land trusts worldwide.
What makes it special?
It features a genuinely community-controlled, tripartite board structure, 8 residents elected by the community, alongside 3 government officials. This ensures a powerful local voice in all decisions. and their resilience is incredible, despite major legislative setbacks where the communal ownership structure was actually repealed by newly elected officials in 2012.
They lost ownership.
Temporarily, yes. But the community mounted this fierce, persistent political advocacy campaign, and they successfully got the communal land ownership restored in 2013.
That's amazing community power.
It really is. This CLT, rooted in a highly vulnerable, historically marginalized community living along a polluted channel, received the prestigious 2015 World Habitat Award for its innovative approach. It just showcases how unstained community agency, organization, and political savvy can overcome significant political and market challenges. It's a testament to the power of a unified community fighting for its land and its future.
So pulling back, what are the key impediments but also the most effective solutions for making CLTs work in the Global South context, given these diverse experiences of both triumph and, well, tribulation?
Internally, many challenges boil down to the inherent difficulties of community organizing, right? It's not always simple to just manufacture the necessary community infrastructure, achieve broad resident consensus, especially when there are diverse interests, existing power structures within the community itself. The Kwamaji Urban Development Project in Nairobi, for example, sadly failed, partly because existing structure owners, the landlords within the settlement, opposed collective ownership. They wanted individual titles for themselves, which derailed the whole collective project.
So internal divisions can stop it before it starts.
Absolutely. It highlights the critical importance of early, sustained consensus building and skillfully navigating those existing power dynamics and vested interests within the community. Externally, third-party support is almost always crucial.
Support from outside groups.
Yes. Help developing robust bylaws, clear operating rules, legally enforceable lease agreements, things community members might not have the technical expertise for. Technical partners can also assist with legal enforcement strategies, board management training, and of course funding. Vital funding often comes from nonprofits. International development organizations like the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative have all supported CLTs globally. This external support is critical for getting started, for ongoing operations, and for strategic growth. Without that external scaffold, many grassroots efforts would really struggle to achieve scale and long-term sustainability.
It's clear that while the challenges are definitely complex, the potential for CLTs in the Global South is just immense, offering this pathway to secure, affordable housing that's rooted in deep community control and resilience, even when facing informality and tough political environments.
Immense potential, yes.
We've seen the theory, the history, the benefits, how CLTs operate from Boston to Puerto Rico, but what's the broader ripple effect? How do community land trusts actually affect the neighborhoods around them? Not just the homes they directly manage, but the wider area.
That's a crucial and often overlooked question, yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at their wider ecological impact. There was a compelling study published in 2023 that specifically looked at CLT activity across the U.S. from 2000 to 2016 and tried to measure its statistical effects on surrounding neighborhood outcomes. It gave some really interesting insights into their broader footprint.
Okay, so what did the research find about home values in areas where CLTs are active? Does it bring down property values for the surrounding homes? That's often a fear people raise.
It's a common concern. The study found that initially, yes, a new CLT purchase is associated with a small, localized decrease in surrounding transaction prices and estimated property values.
A decrease.
It might seem counterintuitive, maybe even a concern at first glance, especially since CLTs often focus their work in lower-income areas. However, the study found that this effect is mitigated and even reversed as the intensity of CLT activity increases in the neighborhood.
Ah, so more CLTs in an area changes the effect.
Exactly. It suggests that as CRTs become more concentrated, more established, more mature in an area, their focus often shifts beyond just providing those individual affordable homes toward broader neighborhood revitalization efforts. They can stabilize areas, attract other positive investments, improve amenities, and ultimately have a positive or at least neutral effect on surrounding property values over the longer term, rather than a purely depreciative one.
They seem to act as anchors of stability. That's a really nuanced finding, so they don't necessarily drag down the market and might actually help stabilize it over time. What about resident mobility and homeownership for people already living nearby? Do CLTs genuinely help prevent displacement? That's such a major concern in gentrifying areas.
This is one of the most compelling and, I think, hopeful findings of that study. It revealed that CLT activity significantly reduces the likelihood of households moving out of the neighborhood.
People stay longer.
Yes. We're talking about a reduction of between 0.85 to 1.17 percentage points in the probability of moving for residents living within about 600 meters, roughly a third of a mile of a CLT property.
That sounds statistically significant.
It is. It's a substantial stickiness effect, meaning people are staying put more often. And importantly, this reduction in moving, this increased stability, was particularly pronounced for Black and Hispanic households groups traditionally at higher risk of displacement due to economic pressures and gentrification.
Wow. So it directly helps those most vulnerable stay in place.
It powerfully indicates that CLTs are highly effective tools for helping current residents, especially those most vulnerable, remain in their neighborhoods. It bolsters community stability, preserves those vital social networks.
So they genuinely help people stay put, especially those who might otherwise be forced out by rising costs.
Mm.
That perfectly aligns with that core goal of preventing displacement, preserving existing communities.
Okay, but here's a surprising piece from the research. It seems counterintuitive. The study also suggested that CLT activity is associated with a decrease in the likelihood that households in the surrounding area own their homes. How can that be if CLTs are promoting homeownership within the trust?
That is indeed counterintuitive at first glance, isn't it? And it points to a really fascinating dynamic. What the researchers think is happening is this: the increased stability, the improved desirability, the sense of an inclusive environment created by the presence and activity of CLTs in a neighborhood. It's accompanied by an influx of renters into that same surrounding area.
Renters are moving in nearby. Why? Likely because the increased affordability and stability created or preserved by the CLT makes the neighborhood more attractive and accessible to people who might not otherwise have been able to afford to live there at all. And those newcomers, drawn to the now more stable and desirable neighborhood, are often renters, perhaps because market rate home prices nearby might still be high, or because rental options become more available or appealing.
Okay, so existing homeowners are staying put more.
Right. Less likely to move out.
But the new people moving into the surrounding area are more likely to be renters.
Exactly. So while existing homeowners benefit from stability, the overall proportion of homeowners in the immediate vicinity might slightly decline as more rental opportunities open up or become more attractive, drawing in a new wave of residents. It suggests CLTs might actually foster a more diverse tenure mix, homeowners and renters living side by side, making neighborhoods accessible to a wider range of incomes and housing preferences, ultimately leading perhaps to a more vibrant, economically diverse community overall.
That's a truly complex ripple effect. It shows that CLTs aren't just about the specific homes they manage. They're also shaping the broader dynamics, the demographics of a neighborhood, fostering a more inclusive, more mixed environment, maybe?
That seems to be what the data is suggesting, yes. A more complex, but potentially very positive impact.
Wow. We've really taken a deep dive into community land trusts today, haven't we?
We certainly have covered a lot of ground.
We've uncovered their fascinating, layered historical roots from the philosophies of Henry George and Ebenezer Howard all the way to the urgent transformative efforts of civil rights pioneers fighting for land security and empowerment.
Yeah, that history is so important.
We've seen how they've evolved into this powerful, flexible tool, creating lasting affordability, empowering communities, fostering racial equity, even enabling wealth building. Not just in theory, but with concrete, real-world examples from Boston to Houston, and even through those challenging but inspiring applications in places like Puerto Rico and Kenya.
The adaptability is key.
And we've just learned about their surprising ripple effects on neighborhood dynamics, promoting stability for existing residents, while also potentially attracting a wider mix of people.
It's a model that really pushes us, I think, to rethink our conventional notions of property, doesn't it? CLTs demonstrate that our relationship with land doesn't have to be solely about individual gain or just unchecked speculation.
Right.
They offer this really compelling vision where property can serve a collective good, where the land itself can truly anchor a community, ensuring stable, affordable homes for generations to come, and building wealth that stays within and benefits the community.
This really raises an important question for all of us listening right now. In a world where housing costs just keep climbing, outpacing incomes, where the very idea of home feels increasingly precarious, increasingly out of reach for so many people, what might the widespread, truly mainstream adoption of models like community land trusts actually mean? What could it mean for the future of our cities, our communities, and the very idea of home itself? What stands out to you as the biggest implication here? What possibilities do CLTs unlock for the future?